Alright, so I'm going to continue with the pressure flaking. The easiest way to do this to match the original is just remove some off the base. It makes it narrow the quickest by removing off the base, and also it helps to regulate the thinness, but I won't do that yet. What I'll do is I'll leave a lot of this base on here, just in case the tip snaps off or whatever, that sort of thing. Okay, it's better to leave it long. In fact, if I had left it even longer, it wouldn't be bad. You can always trim off the base. Okay. Alright. I just need to make it more narrow. Okay. The easy way to make it narrow is with something that to scrape the edge, but I don't have one of those. So I use an abrader like this and just brush the edge, get rid of some of that width. Alright. I'm going to do another pass over that last pass, so I'll have good platforms for sending flakes into this area that is the original flake scar, because I don't want any of that to show. I mean, that would be the easy way out. And they were done that way sometimes, the real ones. But everyone wants to see flaking on both sides, which means bifacial. I got a question. What is the difference between a biface and a preform? A biface is anything that's flaked on both sides. And I go a little bit further and say flaked 60% or more. 60, right? I think that's what I came up with. It's completely arbitrary, but more than half of the face, I think, is a requirement for being considered flaked on that side for biface purposes. So 60% or more flaked on both sides is how I define a biface. And it could be anything, a finished point or a point in manufacture or a preform. A preform is specific to the type of point. Now preforms can be similar to each other for different point styles, but a preform is specific to a point. It is the preliminary shape of a specific kind of point. Now, it doesn't have to be, and that pertains to all points. It doesn't have to be only for Clovis. Does Clovis have preforms? Yeah. Is it the only point that has preforms? No. Are there points that don't have preforms? I think yes, maybe. I don't want to say no because there's probably an exception out there. But usually all points will have a preform shape that you'll find in the archaeological record that, yeah, they were going to make yada yada out of this preform. So preforms are specific, bifaces are not. It's just a general, bifaces is a general category of anything flaked on both sides, more than 60%, the way I define it. Okay. Alright, so what that did was that smoothed out everything, made the edge more regular, straighter. Now I'll abrade it so I can do a pass on the other side on both edges. I think I'm going to take a break after this segment because the insects are just swarming in now that the sun's gone down. Alright, take a break so that the insects can fly away, and then when I make the next video it'll take time for them to come back. Okay? Yeah. In theory, those bugs are quick though. We'll see what happens. Alright, let's get a good pass here. I'm going to try to let these flakes run free. With this gap, I didn't intentionally put it in there. It just happened with the tool tips constantly digging in. But I can use that to my advantage to let these flakes run free. Although it's hard to hold it steady. I'm using a lot of inward pressure. But not too much inward pressure, because then I would end up with step fracturing. Being careful not to bridge the ends, because it'll snap in the middle. And if it hits the pad, if the flake path is hitting the pad, oh well. We'll see. It shouldn't be too much of an issue with a step fracture, because if it does that, I can just usually peel it off with my fingernail. Might have some remnants that won't come off, but oh well. As long as I don't crush the edge. I had to pop a big flake out there because I was starting to crush the edge. Get rid of that crushing. Can't have any crushing. Alright, so there's that pass. Let's see how well I can do on the next pass. Now, flaking away from the point. I don't want to flake upward that way because it'll pop the point off. You can flake in that direction. I'm not saying you can't, but in my experience, it's a risky proposition. Dang it, I can't get a good... I mean, they're traveling, but I can't get a good purchase to get a good feeling for those flakes. It's got to seat well. Yeah, it's got to seat well enough to drive a long way. Oop. Opposite of that. Oh well. Short, they're short right there. I should just stop and regrind. Yep. And I'm not going to. Indirect percussion can blow that away. Okay, so that's that pass. It messed up right here, but I got some good flakes there. If these had gone further, if I was paying more attention, this type of step wouldn't have happened, right? But I can probably get that with another pass. You know, take care of that step fracture with another pass. Or with an indirect percussion flake, specifically in that area. What is the strategy now? How do I get it thin now? It's still not thin enough to match the thinness of the original or the pattern. You'll see. It's going to be trial and error. Will pressure flaking do it, or will I have to use indirect percussion, or both? Combination of both, or just proceed like I'm doing damage control with the thickness being the damage, and I'm just trying to get rid of thickness with any method possible from various angles of attack and that sort of thing. Damage control for me is opportunistic. I'll just attack the problem area from wherever I can. So this can be systematic. I did a pass on this side. Now I'm again pushing in the same direction, but just short flakes to remove what they call deltas, or these little triangle things sticking out. These triangle protrusions on the edges. They usually have a ridge running right down them. You know, each little delta sticking out usually has a ridge on it on the other side. You just pop those off, short downward flakes. And now I'm going to run some thinning flakes in areas that are fat with indirect percussion, specifically targeting certain areas with a more pointy tool. I have to dress this tool up, make it more pointy. All right. So this could take a little while. It's 10 minutes, okay. Not too bad. Alright, so why were Cahokia points made so thin in some cases? Well, we look at the Cahokia stuff in general. Most Cahokia points are rather crude by comparison to the thin ones. The thin ones were the perfect points, you know, the ones that were made by the most skilled or most resourceful people that had the right tools, maybe even copper pressure flakers, for doing the delicate work. I shouldn't say the right tools, but the most desirable tools. Or it could have been an industry. Just like making beads was an industry, they were worth money. You can make fancy arrowheads as a form of wealth. Anything you could not duplicate easily cannot be transformed into wealth or represents wealth. Anything that's difficult to produce, either through mining or handicrafts or some other rare item, can be used as a form of wealth. Okay. So yeah, I think these fancy Cahokia points were a form of wealth. They're not really used for anything. The really thin ones, the fancy thin ones. In the case of Cahokias. Now there are some that are very thin. Some projectile points that are just made thin, and they're all that way in that particular style. So it's hard to tell whether they were actually fired as projectile points unless you see a lot of impact fractures, in which case yes, they were fired. Or, you know, that's the only type you find. If it's the only type you find, I guess they were shooting him. What else were they shooting? Yeah, they could be shooting bone points. Could be shooting wooden points, and just the stone ones were for decoration. But you can make other shapes for decoration. You don't have to make an arrowhead shape. So I would think some of them were used for something. All right. This is normally when I don't use gloves, when I get this thin, the gloves tend to get in the way. Okay. I don't know if I abraded the edges. It does not look that way. Okay. I don't want to abrade it too much because then It makes it too hard to remove a flake without using a lot of force, and then when you get into lots of force, you risk breaking the whole thing in half. Alright. Typical stuff. Simple stuff. Yes. It is going to cooperate. Hopefully. So far, so good. Does it not cooperate sometimes? Oh yes, sometimes what you think is a good spot turns out to be tough or not the right dullness, or something is messing you up. Before I strike the other way on that edge, I'm going to take it down with a pressure flaker. Remove these deltas sort of things so the edge goes this way a little bit to remove flakes on the other side. I'll do that now just so you can see what I mean. Just downward. It moves the edge that way. Get rid of thick spots. I don't need to flatten that side or thin that side anymore. I took off a bunch of mass there. I'll be sending in flakes from the base, so I don't need to really worry too much about that mass there. I'll take care of it when I shorten that base. Right now I got to get it down very thin, as thin as I can. And it's a systematic approach, just very slow. Well, it doesn't have to be slow, but I'm doing it slow for the video because I don't want to mess it up. Okay, but yeah, I recommend slower than faster. But don't hold back on the aggressive or bold flake removals, or you won't be able to get it thin. Thinness requires risk taking. That's why it's rare, because sometimes it requires luck. And luck is not always on your side. So I'm going to do some random flaking here and there. It's much easier for me psychologically to deal with random flaking than try to do the same consistent flake every time. Right? Because I start to doubt the next flake is going to work if I do a sequence. Every time I do a sequential flake, it's like the next one statistically doesn't have as great a chance of being successful as the last one, because eventually it's going to break down. And the brain tries to be right, you know, even though the chances might be minimal. See, I'm hitting that step fracture with, I'm pushing against the step fracture to minimize it. Minimize the height of it. I just pushed off on the face of the step fracture. It minimizes the height of it, so when I take the next flake, it'll blast through there. I can even abrade it a little bit on the surface. But the most important thing is the platform on the edge. Yeah, that one didn't go anywhere. That strike caused an incipient fracture. It was right here. The platform was fine, but the flake didn't go anywhere, and now it's unreleased. So the next attempt is going to have to be somewhere else. One of those deltas to attack that little mass. So I'm going to attack it with some pressure. That way I can get in there with more accuracy than with the indirect percussion. Okay, so I'm going to attack that with pressure. I can't have those step fractures on the edge. Can't have that at all. Even if I have to lose some width, I'll lose the width. I don't care. Alright, so I popped out a pressure flake, just blasted that away. Not too worried about sending in a thinning flake. I just needed to get rid of that step fracture. Let's see if I can send in some more pressure to get that thin. It worked, but not well enough. It was not able to seat as well as I wanted. When it doesn't seat, it creates a short flake or a step fracture. It's got to be able to seat itself on the platform. I'm going to have to take some of the tip off. Okay. Why am I taking the tip off? To keep the edge straight. See, it's starting to go in too much here. I need to keep the edge straight at the same time that I'm thinning. And of course, it's rather crunchy. Of course, I didn't mean to take that much off the tip. But of course, it's just rather crunchy in that one spot, which means the flakes are not detaching cleanly. Yeah, that's better. Clean like that. See, these are not crunching. Okay. Yeah, much better. See, I'm able to seat the tool on the edge without crushing or crunching, which helps a lot. And it does have something to do with the cortex. A little bit too much cortex. Alright, so that's getting pretty thin. Let's see. We still have enough length because I took off quite a bit from the tip. See, I didn't even remove anything from the base, and it seemed to be pretty long, but losing part of the tip is quite devastating, right? You lose twice as much as you think. it doesn't, you know, just keep in mind that you're going to lose a lot more than you think if even a little bit of the tip comes off, as you could see. At least with me, I got to remind myself that even a little bit off the tip is going to make a big difference. There it goes again. So I may not have any room on the base. I may have reached the limit. I'm about to reach the limit because that tip keeps popping off. So yeah, I've got to be very careful. Alright, so I'll stop messing with the tip for now because it's pretty thin. I'm going to leave this side flat and just keep removing mass from this more rounded side. More convex. Is this how I do all my thin points? Yeah, sometimes I can go faster though. This one though, I can't go fast. Even if I was off camera, I don't think I could go fast on this one. Because this still does have some of the Cortex type material that is prone to being steppy. Prone to crushing. I got to be more careful with the abrading, more careful with the convexity. Everything has to be more perfect the more difficult the material is to flake. You can't just haphazardly try to get good results from bad material or material difficult to flake. That's why it's hard for new guys. One of the reasons why it's hard for new guys to work tough stone is because all the conditions need to be perfect for flaking to get good results. But new people are the exact opposite people for obtaining a perfect surface. Right? Well, you might say, well, it'll teach you how to make perfect surfaces. There's a little bit of a catch-22 in there. If you can't flake it to begin with, you're not going to be able to make a perfect surface out of it. You've got to have some experience to just know how to flake it, period, before you can actually make the surfaces perfect. Right? A little bit of a catch-22, but it's not impossible to learn that way. It's just very difficult. Okay. I think I'm... I'll wait. I got a couple more minutes. I was going to continue it on the next segment, but I got a couple more minutes. Let's see if I can do this here. Make a thinning pass. Now I'm going to go in between the flakes I just removed on some of these. As long as I can see a clear ridge, I'll go in between. Alright, now the other side. I am careful to follow ridges when I can. If not, Doesn't really matter too much. And just got to be careful. I got to get these past halfway and not just median ridge, which requires more force and more risk. A lot of force with these, and it increases as you go down. Okay, but that's the second pass. It's starting to get pretty thin, but I'm running out of room. I still have a good amount of width, just the length is getting I almost have no more length to work with. I can just do only one thinning pass on the base. Okay, I'll continue on the next segment.